Good morning, everybody. You're here with Chris Wright at our dyno room, control room, Procar Associates in Akron, Ohio. I've shared some pictures some of you may have watched, from the dyno control room and what all goes on. Obviously, this is where some people would say the magic happens, right? It's always fun being back here in the control area while the engine's running over there and you get everybody around you. And it's always interesting to see a customer for the first time that runs their engine and does a full sweep test with it, right? Because if somebody's standing and watching, you'll actually, a lot of times you'll see the hair stand up on the back of their neck, so it's kind of entertaining. But a lot of people over the years have been kind of impressed with the dyno room that we have here, and mainly because, I'll be honest, it took us 10 years to put this dyno together. My dad had a vision, and as an ex-GM engineer, he wanted a dyno cell that could do anything. So, he had been in tons of dyno cells his whole life. Some of you may, those of you that know us and me know his name was Chuck Wright. Been in the industry, done this for all his life, going back into the late 50s and 60s. So this when we started this project and started doing this room, I mean, we built everything for this ourselves. My dad and his friends, key people along the way that we would bring in to help us set up different things about this dyno cells to make it, one, explosion proof, two, be able, in case of a fire, we can pull a vacuum in the room and basically extinguish the fire just by pulling the vacuum in the room and sucking all the oxygen out of the room. From the water supply, I mean, hell, it took us a year just to get the water supply stuff set up, so we could have everything we needed, because a lot of people don't realize the kind of water supply you need to provide for the dyno and the engine. And so when we started looking at it, we wanted 400 gallons per minute water. So fortunately, we were able to get it. But that took a lot of time. And then, obviously the key component to the dyno is this Depac interface. And then, of course, this ADL control, which is nice for the load control. So, recently, we all know, well, it's been over a year since Dave Manzolini passed away from Depac. He was a brilliant man, could be a difficult man, but extremely intelligent on dyno controls. And by far, the Depac, in our opinion, was always one of the top in the industry. Especially for when you're in a private facility like this, we're a pretty good sized shop, but when you start to do a dyno control room like what we have, it starts to, the money starts adding up. I mean, it wasn't just buying the controls and buying, our absorption unit is very rare. There's only it's one of two that exist anywhere in the world. Some of you may know John Meany from Big Stuff 3. He has the twin to our absorption unit. And so, when you start putting all this together and to do it to a level where, if anybody knows my dad, he did everything in the sense that it would last 100 years. Okay, so we did everything in stainless and all this stuff. And then we'd have all the different room controls. We have 4 different fans in that dyno cell, one for the engine, one for the engine exhaust, one for air intake of the room, one for air exhaust of the room. So we can do anything we want with this dyno, and the beauty of it is because the way this absorption unit was designed, and actually the gentleman who did it was out of Baton Rouge, Louisiana. His name is Artie Ross. And he proved the water break industry wrong. He and my dad several years ago had done some projects together, many years ago now. And so my dad fell in love with this dyno control and basically what this absorption unit could do, because when we started pricing up like an eddy current absorber to do what this one does. So our unit can do 2,500 horsepower at 10,000 RPM steady state. So we can hold an engine making peak torque for 100 hours if we want to, okay, up to 2,500 horsepower. And the reason why I already did that is obviously he was doing all that stuff for Gentry back in the day, and they were doing big block twin turbo engines. They wanted to run it for hours. So he proved the industry wrong, and there's no mechanics between the engine and the absorber, just a drive shaft. So that's rare for a brake of this size to be able to do what it can do. And then sweep tests, I mean, we can do 3,500 horsepower. And anybody who knows John's done crazy turbo blown stuff on his as well. So we're very fortunate to have that capability, and it was something we spent a lot of time to do, because to do an eddy current unit that this could do, it would cost you like $3 million. I mean, it was retarded. And that's just to buy the unit, you know. So don't get me wrong, eddy current is beautiful for, you know, up to 1,000 horse. You know, I would have one of those in a heartbeat. But when we needed to start doing what we wanted to do with higher horsepower, RPM, durability type stuff, we were able to come up with this unit through Artie, who had done this to prove the brake industry wrong, and unfortunately there's only 2 out there that exist like it right now. So it's pretty neat to see. I know Dave Manzolini was working on a unit. He and Artie were very close, and he was working on the design of an absorption unit that was supposed to be capable of everything this was and more. He had shown me the designs once, early phase, and a solid model, you know, SolidWorks 3D model, and it was really neat to see and what David was doing with that. And we always wanted, because David was actually, we were going to do the testing here with that unit if it was ready, and so it was very sad to find out, shortly after my dad passed away in December of 2018, that David had passed away that November of 2018. So, you know, he's definitely missed when it comes to the dyno testing and setting up parameters. Spent countless hours with him, but what we have in our facility is the means to do anything we want with the engine. And I never really shared this with anybody, and my dad was very private about it, because this whole room and everything he did was really for himself. And so consequently, at the end of the day, you know, he did it with a straight R&D engineering mindset, that I want to be able to test anything and take it to its limits, and I want to be able to break anything I want to break and do the analysis of it, okay, and failure analysis. And so you have to have a system that can do that, and that's what we have here. We're very fortunate, and I feel very lucky. You know, we have at the shop here, the guys and everybody hears me back here running engines all the time. And one of the things I'm very thankful for is I was the only person that's ever operated this dyno. I've been operating this thing for several years now, and my dad was very adamant from the get-go, from the very first time, and the very first engine we ever ran, Dave Manzolini was here. And he was sitting right next to me right here, and I was operating the dyno controls. And I was the very first person to ever run this dyno. And it was pretty neat, because we put so much into this. Sorry everybody, I got a little choked up there when I realized what I was talking about with David and my father. But anyhow, I was very lucky, because one of the things my dad was always big on was, you know, I was to be the only one to ever operate this. He said, you know, he had operated dynos his whole career. I mean, hell, when he was at GM, he had his own dyno cell just to himself when he was doing that pro stock stuff. And that was back in 70, 71, 72. But so when we did this, he sat down with me and said, "Son, you're the only one that's ever going to operate it. So you got to learn it." So that's where, honestly, God, I mean, the stuff you learn, I mean, I learn every day something, whether it's on here, working on a car, whatever it may be. You know, you never have all the answers. That's just the reality of it. The key is to having a great tool, and then analyzing all the data that you can look at, and kind of out of the box thinking, really. You know, just do it and figure it out. And that's always been our mentality here, is, you know, it's, people came to us at Procar because my dad was probably one of the most knowledgeable men on the internal combustion engine in the industry. He was regarded as one of the top engine developers of our time. He had done very many things going back to the 60s all the way through, starting with Zorbert Duntov at General Motors, you know. And so I was very lucky, obviously, to grow up with that environment. And the things I got to experience from a childhood all the way through was pretty amazing, looking back even at some pictures and stuff. But the reality is the key is always data. And now my dad wasn't a computer guy. He understood everything about them, didn't give two shits about operating a computer at his age and everything. So he said, "That's your deal, son, you do it," right? So over the time, it's like you get really good and you practice, and you know, you try and test and all these different things and analyze the data. And so it's been a very, very much a joy for us to have this facility here. And I just wanted to take a few minutes to let you know the things that we can do, which is we can do tractor pull-on engines, we can do drag engines, we can do twin turbo blown, whatever it is your heart's desire for the most part. I'm not gonna do nitromethane obviously type stuff, but your typical pro mod engines, you know, that we're running and drag racing to, you know, a 400 horsepower 350 Chevy, for example. So we get into all kinds of combinations, variations. We're pretty much set up for the domestics, you know, GM, Ford, and Chrysler. Those are the three I like to run and stick to. And mainly GM obviously being our top, but I mean, I've got everything to run the Fords and all that. I've even got an interface box in there, which I made to do all the interfaces for different EFI systems. So basically, the EFI unit, whatever that may be, Holley, Haltech, Motec, whatever, can mount on, and then I can tether it or plug it right into my interface box, and my interface box has all various sensory wires that go out to the engine, which are all standard. And then I have different adapters, obviously, for different, you know, sensor connectors, depending on make and model. So the fuel injection stuff takes a bit more time to hook up, though, obviously. So carburete's pretty easy. You know, that's easy to get on, get off. I mean, the most engines we've done in a day. At one time, we were doing some circle track testing and engine testing, and we did 3 different engines in a day. You know, pull on, put on, take off, put on, take off, put on. And then the next day we came back and finished up. We had to test like 8 engines for the series. But, so, you know, it's easy to do a carburetor. When you get fuel injected, obviously you got to hook up more things, more sensors, all that kind of stuff, so it takes a little bit more time. And then obviously when you get into twin turbo and all that, now you got all the plumbing and everything for a twin turbo system. So obviously the price ranges. So you're going to spend anywhere from $895 to anywhere up to $1,500 a day, depending on what your combination is and what you're doing. And it's a daily charge, obviously. I don't charge you for the time it takes me to hook it all up. I figure that into that first day's fee, and then we get going. And usually you can fuel map an engine in pretty quick, especially the EFI system. You know, even a carburetor for that matter. Put the wide bands on it. I use Daytona sensors, interface it to the Depac, and so I've got, you know, all my wide bands I need and different headers made. And if you want to run your headers, you can. But our dyno is kind of neat too, because we built in an alternator on the back and a starter on the back, and so consequently I've got big 4 semi batteries over here that alternator is constantly charging when the engine is running. And then we also have a whole fuel system outside, just outside the block wall, which is plumbed in on a 1-inch line, stainless line coming up into the dyno unit, in the dyno cell. And so I have different pumps that I can just plug in real quick and operate right from my dyno control. I've got DC pumps and a big AC pump, so I can do whatever I want. Plus I can use mechanical pumps that are on the engine, obviously, and do whatever we need to do for that. So very flexible. We can do whatever, however we need to do it, but the biggest thing is we use this facility a lot for testing all the engines that we build for customers. Every engine that we build goes across the dyno. I'm going to run it. I'm going to give the person a dyno sheet. Obviously there are some customers that opt not to do certain things with the dyno, and sometimes we just end up doing it on the chassis dyno out in the shop, but for the most part I like to run all the engines on here. And so, anyhow, that's a quick, well, not too quick of an overview. I appreciate your time, and I'm sorry I got a little choked up there talking about Dave and my dad. But, you know, there are 2 great people in this industry. So, hey, if you need anything, or you want help, or you want us to build an engine for you, we have the facilities and the means to test anything you want to test. So you got a drag racing application you want to run, you got a road racing application you want to run it, you want to hold that engine out wide open for a while, or a peak torque for a while. However you want to do it, we can test it here. And I thank you for your time.